I'm an addict seeking recovery. My name is Jack. This is real hard for me to do. I'm going to make this real quick and brief because it's not about me saying things about Ronnie. It's about what Ronnie does for me. I lost my brother in 1969, and I've never been able to bond fully in my heart with another man. And for some reason or other, about a year ago, I met this man and started searching him out in conventions and talking to his friends and getting his recovery tapes, because he said something in many of those tapes that touched me in a place that hasn't happened in a long time. And I've buried a lot of those secrets, a lot of those feelings, and I've never been able to share them with the people that I've had as sponsors before me. And I have to play a great honor to, I went out and used 2 years ago, and it's thank God that I had people like John C. bring me back in this fellowship, that I'm alive today. And thank God that I'm able to be here today and say that, I've got a brother again. And that's not just a brother in Narcotics Anonymous. I feel as though I honestly have a brother in my life again, who is my sponsor. Ronnie?
Oh boy, this is unbelievable. Hello, Narcotics Anonymous of Florida. My name is Ron, and I'm a recovering addict. This is incredible. I feel so blessed to be asked to be here tonight and to share my life and my recovery with you guys, and to be with friends that I've met along this never-ending road of recovery. And I can't believe all the people in this room. This is blowing my mind. And I'm thinking back, I don't know if you guys ever used to watch Saturday Night Live, but in the words of Billy Crystal, Florida, you look marvelous, darling, simply marvelous. Oh, God, man. My heart is like just busting, man. Jeez, my heart is pounding. My hands are sweating. I'm clammy, Remember all the money we spent to feel this way, man, right? Jeez. God. Oh. Jack, I love you. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I sure love you. Oh, boy. I want to thank the convention committee. This is so wonderful to be here and to be a part of this convention. I thank you. You guys did such a great job. I ran registration in San Diego for 5 years in a row, and I know the stress that goes on all year round, not just now, putting this thing together, getting all the pieces of the puzzle together, making sure everything works out. And you know what? You guys did a great job. Let's give them a big round of applause. Great, great, great job. And you know what? I don't want to front nobody off, but is there anybody here in their first 30 days of clean time? If you're in your first 30 days, could you please stand up and let us honor and welcome you to Narcotics Anonymous? Yeah. Keep coming back. Yeah. Yeah. You know, we need each and every one of you people to keep coming back, and if you come back long enough, you're going to realize that you need us too. Man, I tell you, I am nervous, but you know, my fiance in San Diego, Michelle, she always tells me, honey, you're not nervous, you're excited. Look at it like you're excited. So I just want everybody to know that I am really excited right now. And if I get any more excited, yeah, right, boy? I've already lost enough hair. I don't need any more falling out, you know? You know, also I like to always, I like to start off, and I always like to pay honor to the people that were here before I got here, that kept these doors open for an addict like myself when I finally surrendered the illusion of control on November 25th, 1982. I thank all of you. You know who you are. And I want us all to remember, if we can, for a minute, the co-founder of this wonderful fellowship that in 1953, with a handful of other drug addicts, saw the need to start a fellowship that dealt with the disease of addiction, Mr. Jimmy Kennan. We love you, Jimmy. God rest your soul. Okay. Well, this is always hard for me to start. Oh, man. You know, Florida, when I think of Florida, I have some, I don't know if they're fond thoughts or just old thoughts of Florida. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. Yeah. Anybody from Jersey? You from Jersey? I'm from Jersey. And, that's, you know, I live in San Diego now, but New Jersey is always going to be my home, you know. I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I spent the first 27 years running around New Jersey and the streets of Manhattan and New York City. And a bunch of my buddies, when we graduated high school, thought, you know what, let's get out of this bad weather. We'll move down to Florida, you know. So some of them moved to Gainesville, and some of them moved to Cocoa Beach and Winter Garden, you know, and Lauderdale. And so, like, when we were like 19, 20 years old, you know, I was like the 60s and my hair was down to my ass and I had a big old mustache. And, you know, we were all into this love, free drugs, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And would go down to Florida to visit these guys, and they'd always have something for us. You know, you got to take this back to Jersey with you, you know. We're going to have to tear out the back seat of your car, Ron. And we're going to make room for all these kilos of wacky weed. You got to take it back, you know. You're going to turn a big profit. And I can remember, man, going through all these changes, pulling out the back of my 66 Chevelle Malibu, man, and filling it with marijuana. I mean, this stuff was so potent, right? And then we'd wrap it in plastic and aluminum foil, and we'd take canoe, you know, that aftershave canoe, and would pour it all over the back seat, man, and it smelled like a perfume factory. And I'd say, all right, we're out of here, man, we're going back to Jersey, and it smells like canoe, and we're all loaded, you know, we're tripping, and we're smoking numbers, and we get about South Carolina, and what's that smell? You smell that smell? Yeah, I don't know. Could that be the pot? No, we're driving South Carolina, North Carolina. All of a sudden, the entire car smelled like pot. The entire car, man. This stuff was so pungent. And I'm like, please, God, don't let a cop pull us over, man. Please, God, I don't want to go to jail. I'm all a 19-year-old. And luckily, you know, we didn't get busted. We'd bring it back. And as time went on, you know, we did other little transactions with our buddies in Florida. And it became like this little route. You know, I remember one time this friend of mine, John, he was a pornographic film editor in Harlem. Yeah, he worked in this pornographic movie house, and he was the film editor. And so his boss wanted him to transport pornographic films down to Fort Lauderdale. That's against the law. But, hey, I'll pay for you and your buddies to go, all expenses paid, you know. And John was one of the only white boys that could hang out in Harlem in these bars with these brothers that he worked with. I mean, he was well taken care of. So we left New Jersey with 2 film canisters of white heroin, a trunk full of pornographic films in the trunk, a couple of ounces of weed, a couple of Tuinol, some Placidil, some F-65s, you know, some Quaaludes, a bottle of wine, and we went down to Florida. 2 canisters of white heroin. And in 2 weeks, it was gone. And you never saw such a scramble of these 4 guys, man. We gotta get back, let's go, we gotta get back. And man, we're racing back to New Jersey, man, because we started getting crazy. These are the kind of remembrances I have of Florida, you know. So it's really nice to be back here, fellowshipping in recovery. It's really nice. You know, I moved from New Jersey in 1977 to California. And the thoughts that were going through my mind when my P.O. got the courts to transfer me, my aunt and uncle in La Mesa, California said, you know, if you want to start your life over again, we will try to help you to do that. And I petitioned the courts for my P.O. They allowed me to transfer from New Jersey to San Diego, California. And I'll never forget driving cross-country in this little B210 hatchback Datsun with everything in the world I owned in that car. And thinking to myself, my God, I've got this chance to start my life over again. Thank God I'm going to get away from all the bad influences, all the friends, the streets of Manhattan, the Lower East Side, Harlem, the methadone clinics. I'm going to get away from all of that and start my life all over again. And you know, I traumatized my family because of my addiction so severely, and I didn't know this till years later, that my dad turned to my mother when I pulled out of the driveway with my sister Diane, who was willing to drive cross country with me. And my dad turned to my mother and said, you know what, hon? The phone is going to ring one day, and they're going to tell us that our son is dead. We're never going to see him alive again. That's what I did to my family. That's the kind of trauma that my family experienced. They couldn't watch me leave New Jersey with joy in their hearts, with hope that things would change. They just thought that this is the last time they'll ever see me again. And I came out to California with the most sincere desires to have my life changed. I really, really wanted things to be different. I was tired. I was tired of the lifestyle, standing in the methadone clinics at 6 o'clock in the morning with that little light coming out the doorway, trying to get my juice so I could make it to work in the morning. You know, driving over the Lower East Side on Highway 109, going through the Holland Tunnel to cop with 2 or 3 of my buddies in the car, and it's snowing outside, and we're all sniveling because we haven't had a fix in maybe a day or 2. And looking at these guys, and everybody's counting their money. It's like going into the war zone. It's like preparing to go into battle. You know, driving through the tunnel and looking at these guys and thinking in my mind, is this the way it's always going to be? I mean, what happens if I want to be married someday? If I want to raise kids? Is this how my life is always going to be? And you know, when I went to California with those sincere desires, I didn't know that I was bringing the disease of addiction with me. That this 3,000-mile journey was just going to be in vain as far as me stopping to live the way I used to live. You know, the same sincerity I see in the inmates every month that I visit in our jails in San Diego. I'm an H&I guy. Anybody an H&I guy or H&I woman? Huh? I've been doing hospital and institution work since I was 3 months clean, living at a recovery house. And my first panel, a guy named Eddie W. at this recovery house in Pasadena took me into CYA, and I've been hooked ever since. And I still do H&I today. I coordinate 2 different panels in San Diego, and I'm the panel leader for 2 panels in San Diego. And these guys in these jails so many times come up to me after the meeting, and they say, you know what, Ron, when we get out of here, man, we're going to hook up with you. You know, when we get out of here, we're gonna meet you in a meeting, and we want our lives to change, and we're tired of being locked up, and we're tired of living this way. And I know when I hear them say that they are very, very sincere, just as sincere as I was when I left New Jersey to move to California. But I came from New Jersey to California. I lived in like almost a mansion. My aunt and uncle were very wealthy. I lived on top of a mountain. I could see Mexico from their backyard. I could see the ocean from their backyard. It was a very exclusive neighborhood. And in 3 months' time, I found myself tied off, sharing a cooker down in Logan Heights with a guy named Bosco. What happened? I had all these dreams. I had all these sincere desires that my life was going to change. What happened? What happened to me is what happens to a lot of us. The disease takes over. The disease starts to talk to us. Like, well, you know what? You're 3,000 miles away from that madness. You're not going to get hooked out here, you know? I mean, these people shoot this brown stuff. I mean, come on, man. You're going to be all right. I mean, come on. Like, you don't have a problem with alcohol. You can drink. Or you can snort coke on the weekends, you know, at these parties and stuff. Or, you know, just a couple of Placidils or a couple of Valiums to take the edge off, you know? You're not going to get hooked again. You're not going to stand in them juice lines again. You're in California now. You got one coming. And what you guys have taught me is that my entire existence on this planet as an addict in recovery depends on not picking up that first whatever it is today. I had a career in New Jersey. See, I was different. You know, my buddies in Jersey, you know, they used to go to jail. They were on unemployment. They got busted, and I worked for the phone company right out of high school, man. I was a phone company guy until I got busted by the State Narcotics Strike Force at work after 10 years and lost the entire career. And then there was no more separation. See, my head likes to separate me from you. You know, we're all God's kids. All of us, no matter what I think. And my head used to say things like, well, I got a job. I'm okay, you know. I'm the one fronting the money for these drugs, you know. I'm not like these guys. They're on unemployment. They're running the streets. They're climbing in people's backyards and robbing them. That's not me. I'm not an addict. I'm okay. And when that job and that career was taken from me, I had to start looking at myself or start to use more drugs as a distraction. You know, one of the aspects of my disease is I use drugs to distract myself from who and what I really am, from what I really think, from how I really feel. And so when I moved to California, the process speeded up. It speeded up. And miraculously, when I got discharged, the company out there hired me back in. It was like a miracle. My parents couldn't believe it one more time. It's like God had his hand on my shoulder. My father used to always say, you know, Ronnie, some people got angels on their shoulders. You got 2 angels on your shoulders. I never saw anybody so lucky in my entire life. And I got hired back into the company out there. And then 2 years later, I was strung out like a dog again. Living on Lantana Drive, shooting dope every day, living to use, using to live. And you all know that the ends are always the same. Jails, institutions, and death. And I started to die. And we talk about death in Narcotics Anonymous, and right away we always think, I know I did in the beginning, that, oh, it's the mortality death. Someone actually dies. How many of us in this room tonight have walked this planet dead? No compassion, no empathy for any other human being. No limitations on what you would or wouldn't do to get the next drug. That was me. And in 1981, I got introduced to Narcotics Anonymous and a treatment center. And it was a struggle for me because I had been using drugs since I was 13 years old. That was my best friend. And so I struggled in these treatment centers. I was the kind of guy that would go into a treatment center, they'd put me on clonidine and catapres for 5 days, knock me out, and then the 6th day I would wake up, and it was time for morning meditation, and so I heard, morning medication. So I would run to this meeting, right, to get my morning medication. There would be no morning medication, and I'd be on the phone to the connection. Hey, man, I'm in this detox. Can you bring me a couple balloons? Yeah, I got some money. And I would start using in these hospitals because I was powerless, and my life was unmanageable. And I remember sitting in these therapy rooms in these 28-day detoxes, nodding out. And the nurses going like, how much meds are they giving this guy, And I'd be all scratching and, that's a good meditation this morning. Oh, man, good meditation. Solid. I relate to that, I was a screwed up, pitiful, helpless human being. And for a couple of years, I bounced around in and out of these detoxes and recovery houses, and I was always around Narcotics Anonymous. I went to meetings regularly, but I couldn't stay clean. I was like this 30-day in and out guy, 30 days, he gets a white chip, bam, he's out using. 30 days, he gets a white chip, he grabs a newcomer girl, and bam, they're out using. 30 days, I was this perpetual newcomer. It was embarrassing because, like, at our meetings, how when we start our meetings, we always say, is there anyone in their first 30 days of clean time? If so, could you please introduce yourself to the group? We'll start with Ron, and we'll work our way around the room tonight. I was just this sleazy. I was the kind of addict. I wasn't one of these tough guys. Right in your face, mother. I was one of these guys that would steal your money and then say, well, let's look for it, It must be around here somewhere, Holmes. Always pinch your bag. That was just off the top, Always. So a couple of years of this madness, and finally, once I get 90 days clean, and it was like a big deal. These people had been watching me in and out, pulling all these sleazy moves, sleazy moves. And finally, I got 90 days, and it was real, grandiose ride. They gave me this. 2 guys gave me this 90-day chip. I think they taped it. It was this big, at this hospital, and give you a little copy of the tape. And within a week, I was using it again. And the reason I was using it again is because my head, one more time, the disease says to me, like, oh, you're really feeling a little anxious here, and, it's like you got these uncontrollable fears and don't know what they are, and, you've done this before and you've gotten back before, so just use one more time, all the women, how they welcomed you back in and hugged you, all keep coming back, Ron, and what I want to say is that the door of Narcotics Anonymous does swing both ways. But I'm here to tell you that sometime that door gets stuck. And I could not get clean again. And I only used for 4 more months. And it was the worst 4 months of my entire life using. Our book tells us that this disease is incurable. There is no cure for addiction. It's progressive. It gets worse over time. And it's in and of itself fatal. It will kill us if we don't recover from it. And in 4 months' time, I wound up in a hospital one night. I woke up about 11 o'clock at night after fixing early with a bunch of friends, and I had this pain in my heart, man. I said, wow, this really hurts, and my arm was hurting. And I woke up at 11 o'clock, and I broke out in this sweat, and I had like a really hot fever, and I figured, I must have the flu or something. I'll go drink some alcohol. I had it in the kitchen, and I'll just relax me, go back to sleep. And I took a couple of chugs, and I went back to sleep. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and I knew I was dying. I couldn't breathe. The pain was just running down my left arm. I called the operator. They sent the paramedics to my house, and I remember the fight on the way to the hospital because the paramedics had me in this stretcher, and they were putting oxygen on my face. And every time they put oxygen on my face, it was like throwing gasoline on a fire because I had bacterial endocarditis of the heart valves. And it's a staph infection that I injected into myself. And the staph infection went from my heart to my bone marrows. And it went from my bone marrow into my kidneys, into my right lung with embolies in my lung. And I had hepatitis, I had septicemia of the blood system, I had 105 fever, and I was dying. And they brought me to Sharp Cabrillo Hospital. I went up on the 8th floor, and I was in and out of consciousness. They had me on all these machines, and I was dying. I was dying. And after a couple of weeks on these machines in this hospital, I remember coming to consciousness, and every so often when I would come to consciousness, the pain would be so excruciating that they would hit me with Vistarol again to slow down my breathing. And they would mix Demerol, and I had a habit going in, so every 3 hours they're giving me Demerol and Vistarol, and that's just keeping me from not being sick, but I'm on fire with pain. And after 2 weeks in this hospital, I've got like heart monitors, breathing machines, I've got intravenous, all kinds of stuff in this room, and the doctors came in, and I was kind of clear for a while, and the doctor said, Ron, I think we have some good news, man. I think we're going to get this thing under control. Do you realize how sick you are? You've got 5 different doctors. You've got this, you've got that. If you ever use drugs again, you're going to blow your heart valve out. Do you understand that? Yes, I understand that. And I remember the doctor running this all down to me, and I remember when he left the room, and I looked around the room, and all this uncomfortability came over me, just like all those other times when my head said, oh man, you feel this and you feel that and you want to change the way you feel and you know what it's going to do that. The first thought came to my mind is that I need a fix. I really need a fix. And I remember the doctor telling me that the next fix is going to blow out my heart, but I figured, you know what? I'm in this hospital. I got the button over here, for the nurses, Anything bad happens, I hit the button, they come running in and hit me, whatever they're going to hit me with, and, if something goes bad, they can fix it. I'm in a hospital, right? So I get on the phone and I call my connection up, Bobby. And I had $1,700, it's a long story, in this hospital room with me. And he was a struggling addict trying to get well a day at a time. So when I said, hey, Holmes, bring me a couple balloons and I'll kick you down a couple, he was more than willing. And he started bringing me heroin to this hospital room. Now, you got to understand, every day this guy is bringing me heroin to the hospital room. I'm all hooked up to these machines. Now we've got all you wonderful people that I met in Narcotics Anonymous that found out, oh, my God, you hear about Ronnie G? He's up on the 8th floor and he's dying, and you got to go visit him, and pray for him and blah, 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 blah. And so I got all you bright-eyed and bushy-tailed recovering people coming, to visit me, and then I got Bobby, I got Bobby, and Bobby really stands out in this crowd, right? So Bobby would be in the room, and my NA friends would be in there, and I'd go, thank you for coming, now you have to leave, yes, thank you very much, here's the book, and I gotta go by, yeah. And I'm I gotta fix, man. And I'm slamming every day in this hospital room, and I'm thinking, is this going to be the one that blows my heart out? It was madness. It was madness. It was powerlessness. You know what I'm talking about. You know what using against your will is all about. Because if you didn't know, you wouldn't be here. You'd still be out there. One more time I was using against my will, and I was dying and dying and dying and dying, and one night my sponsor Phil came to that room and he saw me gouged. He came in a little while after I fixed, and I'm laying in this hospital bed with all these machines hooked up to me with a giant sign, oxygen, no smoking, with a Cool Filter King in my hand, nodding, and he looks at me and he goes, you're loaded. You are loaded. He said, you know what? I am not coming back and watch you kill yourself like this. He says, I love you. I'll go to your funeral, but I won't be a part of this anymore. If you want help, Ronnie, you call me. And he walked out of that hospital room. And the next morning when I woke up, the miracle happened for me. The miracle that has to happen in any addict's life, or this process never gets to start. The illusion was finally smashed. I woke up this morning, I used to have my little ritual, whether you believe this or not. I used to read the meditation book that we had at that time, and then I would call Bobby and put my heroin order in. I did that every morning. That was the madness I was in. I remember the last time I relapsed and I was strung out, talking my connection into going to a meeting. I sweat it, we're all fixing, we're all tied off, and I go, Paul, man, there's a great meeting down the street at Fairmont and Whiteman. Let's go after we get off. He goes, what, are you out of your mind? I actually talked him into going. Me, Bobby, and Paul went to this meeting loaded. Finally, this morning, I looked around me and I realized for the first time that my efforts at finding love and happiness and peace of mind and friendship and security and all the things that human beings deep down in their soul really long for had wound me up in this hospital dying from this disease and not being able to keep this needle out of my arm. And I surrendered. And I broke down crying, uncontrollable crying, the type of crying when you can't even talk. And I eventually called Phil up and said, I'll do anything to stay clean. And for a couple of years around the recovery centers in San Diego, they had been suggesting to me that I go away to a long-term treatment facility, a place that I could be off the streets for maybe 9 months or a year, a place where I could be surrounded by recovering addicts and by this reoccurring theme called recovery that we find in our group settings. And I made a decision to go to this recovery house in Pasadena. And I'll never forget, my mother and sister drove all the way out from New Jersey when I was in this hospital because they didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And they drove me to this recovery house and they dropped me off, and I swear to you, I thought my life was over. Remember the thoughts we used to have? What are we going to do if we're not using? How are we going to fill up our day if we're not using? Who are we going to hang around with if we're not using? What are we going to do? And they dropped me off at this recovery house. And I tell you what, those 8 months that I spent at this recovery house, I went to 3 meetings every day. We read the book. And I remember the Narcotics Anonymous basic text just came out. And what a joy it was to have our book for addicts. I made a decision in this recovery house to take the 3rd step. And the decision that I made was to turn my will in life over to this program. You see, I wasn't on very good terms with God at 60 days clean. As a matter of fact, the word God repulsed me because, you see, I had been hurting people my entire life. And I don't know the kind of God you always had, but the kind of God I always had was keeping score. So when you guys mentioned God, I kind of cringed, thinking like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm really screwed. But you people told me to turn my will, which was to use drugs no matter what, even if my life depended on it, and my lives, the way I lived my life, the dishonest, manipulative, controlling, evil, sleazy way I lived my life, over to this program and to move on and do a 4th step in the hopes that I would get to the 12th step and have a spiritual awakening as a result of them. And I believed you. The only reason I believed you is because I had nothing else to believe in. And so I started to take the steps in this house. I found a sponsor. We talk about miracles in this program, and God rest his soul, Pepe Acuna from California used to always say that a miracle is nothing more and nothing less than a correction. That's what a miracle is. It's a correction. It's a correction in being. It's a correction in thinking. But it's a correction. And in this house, corrections started to happen in this addict's life. And I started to feel the spirit of recovery. You know, that therapeutic value of one addict helping another. We say it's without parallel. And I started to recover. And I started to take steps. And I did a 4th step. And I did a 5th step. And I did a 6th step. And you know, in our 5th step, I always thought that, well, I'm going to have to write all this bad stuff down about Ron. And then I got to tell somebody else all this bad stuff that I write down about Ron. And what it's all about is just finding out what the nature of all these wrongs really were. It wasn't that important what I had done. You hear people talk from the podium all the time, well, I did this and I did that. And it wasn't about what I had done. It was about what motivated me to do the things that I had done. Were they based in self-centeredness? Were they based in false pride? Were they based in dishonesty? Were they based in the illusion of control? Were they self-gratifying? Was self-seeking behind my nature? And with a sponsor's guide, I started to look at myself and to see the true nature of addiction. And in step 6, you know, It doesn't matter how many defects. I hear people go, oh, there's 100 defects of character, there's 50 defects of character, and this and that. It doesn't matter how many defects of character there are. What matters is that I recognize them for what they are, knowing that I'm powerless over my own nature, and that without God in my life, I will continue to act out on these defects. I started to learn what the most glaring of my defects were. And for me, the two most glaring defects was, number one, I was a womanizer. My entire life, I used women to self-gratify myself. And the reason I did is because my self-esteem was so low that the only way I could justify myself as being anything was to put you to bed with me. And the prettier you were, the more I convinced myself that I really was worth something, that there was really something about myself that was worthwhile. And when you self-gratify yourself with other people at their expense, you create a lot of pain in people's lives. And I harmed a lot of people. And most of all, I harmed myself. And that's the way I lived in my addiction. Also, I was a major controller. I remember when I was at this recovery house, they put on my jacket, Major Manager. That was my jacket, Major Manager. The hell is a major manager? A major manager is a guy that thinks that he can work out everything to go his way, and that if he can manipulate people and talk the right thing and do the right thing, he'll be okay. If he can just get everything to fall in line the way he thinks it should be, it'll be okay. What insanity that creates. What pain that creates. And I learned about my defects. I learned about my nature. I learned about what the enemy really was. And I started to recover by asking God humbly to remove these shortcomings. And I sat down eventually and I did an 8th step. And I made a list of all the people that I had harmed. And I put myself on that list. Because really, if anybody had ever done to me what I had done to me, I would probably want to kill them. I created havoc in my life, and I created havoc in the people's lives around me. I left this recovery house and I went to San Diego, back to San Diego, 9 months clean. I was scared to death because my last run in San Diego, I had harmed the fellowship. And what I mean by I had harmed the fellowship, I had stole money from the fellowship. I had stole money from people in the fellowship. I had used and abused people, emotionally trashed people, physically harmed people. And so I was afraid to go back to Narcotics Anonymous. And the reason I was afraid is because now I really want to stay clean and recover, and I wasn't sure you guys were going to accept me back into the fellowship. And what these people told me at this recovery house is, and it still holds true to me today, they said, Ron, if you keep your recovery your daily priority, the rest of your life will take care of itself, whether you like it or not. And if you don't continue to keep your recovery your number one priority, and you start to put the things in life ahead of that, you will feel the pain of addiction. And I have felt the pain of addiction without ever putting a drug in my body. It says in our book that once we arrest the disease of addiction, once we stop using, recovery is then possible. It doesn't say that once you stop using, you're automatically recovering. It says it's then possible. And the proven record, the proven way of life that we have in Narcotics Anonymous is our meeting structure, our cervix structure, our 12 steps, our 12 traditions, and it works really, really good. Thank God it works really, really good. Thank you, Narcotics Anonymous. I started to get involved very heavily in Narcotics Anonymous in service work. I lived on the same house, in the same house, when I went back from this recovery house that I used to shoot dope in. I had 3 connections on my block. I live in the same house today that I used to shoot dope in. One of my connections is dying of AIDS. Another connection fled to New York. And the third connection has about 6 months clean in the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And I want to tell you how fragile this thing we call recovery really is. My buddy Bobby, that used to bring me heroin to the hospital room, is serving life in prison under the third strike rule of California. Not because he's a bad guy, not because he's a tough, mean, ornery guy, because he was an addict that for whatever reasons didn't find recovery. I remember at 4 years clean bringing an H&I panel into the South Bay Jail in Chula Vista, San Diego, and when they walked the inmates in, Bobby came in with his blues. And I'll never forget that meeting, looking at each other, knowing in his heart that this was possible, looking at me 4 years clean. But for whatever reasons, he never surrendered that illusion, and he may never get the chance to do that again. I take recovery very, very, very serious. Everything of value in this addict's life is only because of the program of Narcotics Anonymous. Everything of value. I don't ever want to fall prey to the illusion like I'm the one that has the power to keep this miracle alive. I need you people. I need this program. On my own, I use drugs. I'm an addict. And so the main purpose in this addict's life is to, number one, stay clean, to recover, and two things that I believe in my heart that God really wants for me to experience in life is, number one, to enjoy, and number two, to learn. Everything that I have experienced in my entire lifetime from my God has been either to enjoy or to learn. And I'm going to tell you that I have gone through some misery trying to learn on this planet. When I was 2 years clean, I got involved in a very addictive relationship. Very addictive. You know, the first thing I thought about in the morning was her. The last thing I thought about at night when I went to bed was her. You know? And I knew the second week I got involved with this gal that it was wrong. That little voice inside of me said, Ron, don't do this. She's married. Yeah, Ron, she tells you she's going to separate from her husband. And she tells you that it's been over for years, Ron. And she's beautiful. But she's married. And I went against my own principles and allowed myself to start dating this woman. And yeah, she left her husband. And yeah, they haven't been together in years. But it was a very obsessive, compulsive, dishonest, manipulative relationship. And for a year and a half together, we went back and forth 9 times because I was in love with a dream. I wasn't dealing with reality. I was dealing with what maybe could be. You see, I'm Ronnie G. I got a tough program. I know she's a little screwed up, but, you know, she can hang with me and, you know, we'll go to meetings together and get a little bit of therapy and, you know, we'll bond and someday we'll be able to get married and walk down the rosy path of whatever that is, recovery, you know. And I was in love with the dream. And after a year and a half, I weighed 156 pounds. I had rashes all over my back. I had pains where you will not believe. I hear her voice. You know, let me just call her up and hear her voice. He goes, all right, Ronnie, what I want you to do is you want to hear, what are you going to say to her? Because every time I would call her and hear her voice, then we would talk, and it was, yeah, and then bam, you know, it blew up, right? Or we would run together and have sex. Run into each other's arms and caress. And then that would blow up. So he said, Ronnie, the next time you want to call her, write down on a piece of paper what you really want to say to her. And thank God for that tool. Because what I realized was it was another illusion. The same illusion as drug addiction was. And luckily, I was able to stay away and to recover from that situation. And I tell you what, I had a very, very painful, hard time. I can't tell you what it was like going to meetings. And right away, my biggest fear was answered. Because I always thought, well, if I don't stay here, she's going to go jump, and get involved with someone else, right? And right after we broke up, bam! I'd go to a meeting, and there she was with him. I'd go to the dance, and there she was with him. What about, all that stuff you said? Oh, man. And I hurt, and I hurt, and I hurt. And thank God I had a sponsor to talk to, and thank God I had a sister to talk to, because I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of us not make it through those type of situations. See, the disease doesn't care. The disease will attack us from any way it can. It doesn't care. And I was lucky to get through that. When I was 3 years clean, they pulled all my teeth. My teeth were rotted out for years. And they had capped them all when I was 26. And then finally, I kept shooting dope after they capped them all. And finally, I got into recovery. And after 3 years, they kept doing I had 8 different root canals, and they'd do all this tricks trying to keep it together, And finally, this dentist I had who was in the program said, Ronnie, it's over, man. I got to pull them all. He said, we're talking about the Super Bowl here, I got to pull them all. And you know what? I've heard your story, and I really don't want to put you under. I'm like, what? You're talking to El Primo chicken here, you know what I mean? You could knock me out for a filling. But this guy says he's going to chisel off 13 caps, and then he's going to pry out the roots, what are left underneath, while I'm awake. But the miracle is that I knew this member of Narcotics Anonymous, and I had heard John share for 3 years, and I believed him when he told me, Ronnie, I'll numb you up to the top of your head. You won't feel a thing. I believed him. And I made a decision to turn my teeth over to Dr. John. Yeah, I did. And I'll never forget the feeling of loneliness when my best friend Homer, he dropped me off and said, see you later, Homer, good luck. And I'm walking in this dentist's office going, oh, man. And I sat back and they started chiseling. Ka-chink, ka-chink, ka-chink. And I got this weight on this thing that they pry your caps off, Then this odor. Ooh, man, it smelled like somebody died, right, when these caps come off. Then they start chiseling out your teeth, right? And I get done and I've got this mouthful of bloody gauze. And I go home that night and I think, this is a great time to quit smoking. I got this mouthful of bloody gauze. Nobody in their right mind is going to want to smoke a cigarette. So I thought this is a great time to not smoke, right? So me and her, remember her? Me and her were sitting around the house. Now you dig out, you put gauze, And every so often change it out, put more gauze in. And I'm getting a little edgy, a little nervous. And I said to this gal, can you give me one of your cigarettes? And she said, oh, no, Ronnie, no. You said you were going to quit. I said, no, you understand. I'm a little edgy, a little nervous. I just want one cigarette. I said, that's not what you said last night, remember? You said you were going to quit. Give me a fucking cigarette! And get it now! And here I am with this mouthful of bloody gauze, with all brown from the nicotine, and I'm sucking on this Cool Filter King. Smoke's coming out the side of the gauze, out my nose. Oh, was that enjoyable! Wheezing and hacking and oh, that's good. Oh, man. Now I got an extra filter in my mouth, this gauze. This is real safe. And what I learned from that experience is that while I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable, I can't do certain things. And I have to remember that in your life, that there's times in recovery that we're powerless and our life is unmanageable. And that I believe in my heart that we're doing, all of us, even the people that were yelling tonight in our readings, are doing the best we can. And if we could do any better, we would. I'm an NA trooper. Believe me, I have thrown down on meetings before when people do these little, sick, I hate it. But for my emotional and spiritual being and well-being, I have to surrender the fact that, you know what? Some are sicker than others. That we vary in the degree of our disease and in the rates of our recovery. And if I don't allow you to be you, then how in the hell can I allow me to be me? But for a year, I wanted to quit smoking. And I called my dad in New Jersey once, and every morning with the ritual, go to the toilet with my Just for Today book and my cup of coffee and my pack of cigarettes and read the spiritual, drink the coffee, I gotta quit smoking, this is killing me, spitting out these little brown things and wheezing at night, you lay down and you'd be with some girl or something, go, do you hear something? No, I don't hear, wheezing and coughing up stuff, And finally, out of my frustration, I'm, watching these guys I sponsor with like 60 days clean, quitting smoking, and here I am with 4.5 years. Yeah, you're doing good, man. You're really doing good, Yeah. And finally, I said to my dad one day, he had smoked 30-something years and he quit. And I said, Dad, I'm going nuts, man. I said, you know what? I cannot let go of cigarettes. It's driving me crazy. I dodged the biggest bullet of my life, addiction to drugs, and I'm killing myself one drag at a time with cigarettes. Daddy, how did you quit? God rest my father's soul in his Spanish wisdom, man. He said, Ronnie, you know what? He says, you're going to be amazed. When you make up your mind that you don't want to smoke anymore, you're going to be amazed how easy it is, Ronnie. He says, the hard part is making up your mind. And that is the way it's been in this addict's life for everything. From the days that I first walked into Narcotics Anonymous, and the days that I couldn't let go of those relationships that might not be good for me, or that dishonesty that might still be getting in the way. A while back, man, I'm almost 15 years clean. And they gave us these laptop computers at work, right? And they said, well, you can take them home, you can use them at home. Hey, don't worry about it, bring them out. So I had like an extra one, right? And so I put this extra one in my closet, thinking like, well, this will be great, because then I don't have to bring mine from work home, and I can use this one and, connect and do what I got to do, and blah, 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 blah. In the back of my mind, I know this little thing's going, well, maybe they'll forget about it. So time goes on, and I haven't stole it. They didn't ask for it back. It's in the closet. I use it, when I bring it home, and this is 14 years clean, right? And all of a sudden, the boss says one day, well, has everybody turned in their extra laptop? And the first thing my mouth wanted to say was, yeah. And I went to go, yeah, and I went, no. I still have mine at home, and I'll bring it in next week. And that's not me. That is not me. That is a God working in my life. That is not me. When I was 5 years clean, thank you, Narcotics Anonymous, you gave me the power and the hope to let down and to put away and to sit down the longest addiction in this addict's life. I laid down cigarettes, and I've got almost 10 years without a cigarette. Thank you, Narcotics Anonymous. I don't know about anybody else, but cigarettes is the longest addiction in this addict's life. I can remember when I was 9 years old, I can remember the first cigarette like it was yesterday. We were all playing Army in the woods, me and the boys, and Andy Jingleski brought up 4 Salems that he stole from his father. And we looked at the cigarettes and we went, oh, wow, man. Like, you know, this is really cool playing Army in the woods, but it's going to be a lot cooler after we fire these bad boys up. It changed the way I felt. It changed the way I felt about myself. It changed the way I felt about what I was doing. And it's only a miracle, another correction, that I haven't smoked in almost 10 years a day at a time. It can be done. You know, and I want to say this. I forgot to say this. Beav said this the other night about Martha, and I want to say, Michelle, I love you. That's my fiance. We've been together for 8 years, and she's over 10 years clean. So if you women think you can't recover, that's a lie. She's over 10 years clean. Keep coming back. We can do this thing, all of us, together. Together. You know, it took me 9.5 years to make amends to the people that I had harmed. And when I first got clean, I owed 5 digits. I was in a hospital for 2 months. My bill was $360,000. I owed 20% of that to the doctors that took care of me. I had 28 bad checks. I had credit card fraud. I had collection agencies after me, and everybody, even at this recovery house, people with long years of clean time. Well, you know, you didn't come to NA to, you know, be broke. You know what I mean? Maybe you need to claim bankruptcy, Ron, you know, and I thought, yeah, bankruptcy, get out from under, right? And that little voice, you know, the one that told me not to get involved with her, well, that same little voice said to me, like, hey, Ron, why not, instead of just claiming bankruptcy, why don't you call all these people up, and why don't you see if maybe they'd be willing to work with you, and maybe you could just pay them a little bit at a time, and this, that, and the other thing. And you know what? Once again, the program worked. And I'm here to tell you that after 9.5 years being clean, I wiped my hands of the wreckage financially of my past. And I feel really good about that. I really do. In 1989, my father was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And you know, I don't have the excuse to lay to you guys that I came from this alcoholic family where I was abused and beat up and kicked. I didn't. I know a lot of us do. And it breaks my heart to know that you had to go through that. But I don't have that excuse. I came from a family where my mother and father lived for their kids. They did everything in the world to give us a good life. They took us to church. My father took me to Little League. He got me involved in sports. He got me involved in all types of activities to have a healthy relationship as a father and a child. And he was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and they told me he had 3 months to live. And I was 8 years clean. And I asked my job if I could go back to New Jersey and spend the last 3 months of his life with him. And they okayed it. And I went back there, and thank God for the Fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous in New Jersey. Because those guys took me to meetings, and they allowed me to cry, and they allowed me to vent my pain, and they allowed me to vent my frustration. You know, we talk about powerless and unmanageability. Powerlessness when you watch your father, your idol, your hero, the man that you've loved your entire life, vomiting blood on your front porch, dwindling away to 100 pounds, nothing left but a shell of a human being, and not being able to do anything to change it. That's powerlessness. And you know, when my father was dying, they called me back to work, and he was still alive. And he only had maybe 3 or 4 weeks left. And I had to say goodbye to my father, knowing that this is going to be the last time I ever see my daddy alive. And I remember laying on the bed with him, holding him in my arms. And I felt such guilt and such pain of all the crap that I had put my family through for so many years. And I held him and I said, Daddy, I'm so sorry what I did to you. I'm so sorry all those nights in the jails and the institutions and the stealing and the lies. I'm so sorry I did any of that. I have this disease. I'm so sorry. And my father looked at me and said, Ronnie, you've got nothing to be sorry about. Narcotics Anonymous gave me back my son. I love you. And I was able to be there for my family. I was able to help my family through a really hard time instead of doing the things that I had always done, run away and create problems. You know, and when I was a little over 10 years clean, one of my closest friends in this program who suffered from clinical depression, and there's nothing more that pisses me off when I hear somebody in our fellowship tell somebody else what they should be and shouldn't be doing as far as medical advice. I can't even manage my own life. How in the hell am I going to manage yours? And people were telling Jeff, like, you don't need to take antidepressants. You know, that's not really being clean. And Jeff suffered from clinical depression. And Jeff made a decision not to take his antidepressants. And at my Friday night home group, we talked to Jeff. Jeff, you got to get back to the doctor. You can't lock yourself in the bedroom for 3 and 4 days and not come out. You need to go back to this doctor and you need to get back on your meds. Will you do that? He said, yes, I will. And that was Friday night. And I never saw Jeff alive again because Saturday night, Jeff chose one more time to try to ease the pain of living through drugs, and he died. And that same year, my sponsor of 14 and a half years, Phil, relapsed behind pain medication in recovery. And in a year's time, he lost everything. Everything that 14 and a half years of recovery has built for him. A wife, a home, a car, a trailer, a bank account. And he picked up 4 felonies. And in the state of California, they don't care how long you're clean. Because if they can 3-strike you on a 3 felony count, they're going to bury you for the rest of your life in prison. And Phil was on a $250,000 bail facing life in prison. And I want to tell you about the Hand of Narcotics Anonymous. I want to tell you about one addict helping another. Because 14 years ago, Phil allowed this sleazy, tattooed dope fiend to kick on his couch. And after he kicked on his couch, Phil talked to a guy named Jack up in Los Angeles and got this guy into this recovery house. And this guy started to stay clean. And 2 years later, after he was clean 2 years, we find out that Tom is a multi-millionaire. That his family is one of the wealthiest families in the state of California. And thank God for Tom. Because you see, Phil extended the Hand of Narcotics Anonymous to an addict in need 14 years ago. And when Phil was sitting in jail with a $250,000 bail with 4 felonies over his head, Tom came with all the money and all the lawyers that the system could handle. And Phil had to go do some time. He had to go to Folsom for a little while. But Phil is walking the streets of San Diego today 2.5 years clean because of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, when we're in our meeting setting, the book tells us that the most powerful vehicle we have as a fellowship to carry the message of recovery is our meetings. And when we're in our meetings, settings, as a fellowship, we need to think about the man and the woman that is coming into this fellowship new. We need to keep in our mind the fact that we were welcomed when we came here. And that we need to make an effort to that person to welcome them when they get here. You know, our 5th tradition says that we have but one primary purpose: to carry the message, to carry the message, to carry the message. Our message, our promise is freedom. Freedom from active addiction. Freedom to walk in the light of the truth. Our message is hope, in the hopes that no addict seeking recovery need ever die from the horrors of addiction. That is our primary purpose, to carry that message. I'm getting all emotional here, and I'm just about, I'm just about done. And I want to share with you a little something that my sponsor printed out for me a while back that really touches my heart, which really lifts my spirit to what this fellowship really is and should be all about. And the name of this that I want to read to you is called If God Could Speak to Narcotics Anonymous. He might say this: into your weak and feeble hands I've entrusted a power beyond estimate. To you has been given that which has been denied to the most learned of your fellows. Not to scientists, nor statesmen, not to wives nor mothers, not even to my priests and ministers have I given this gift of healing other addicts, which I entrust to you. It must be used unselfishly. It carries with it grave responsibilities. No day can be too long. No demands upon your time can be too urgent. No case too pitiful. No task too hard. No effort too great. It must be used with tolerance, for I have restricted its endowment to no particular race, creed, or denomination. Personal criticism you must expect. Lack of appreciation will be common. Ridicule will be your lot. Your motives will be misjudged. You must be prepared for adversity, for what men call adversity is the ladder you must climb towards spiritual perfection. I shall not expect of you that which is beyond your capabilities. You have not been selected because of your exceptional talents. Be careful always, if success attends your efforts, not to subscribe to personal superiority, that which you can claim to only by virtue of my gift to you. If I had wanted learned men to accomplish this mission, the power would have been entrusted to the physician and the scientist. If I had wanted eloquent men, there would have been many anxious for the assignment, as talk is the easiest used of all the talents in which I have endowed mankind. If I had wanted scholarly men, the world is filled with better qualified than you. You were selected because you have been the outcasts of the world, and your long experience as an addict has made you humbly alert to the cries of distress that comes from the lonely hearts of addicts everywhere. Keep ever in mind the admission that you made on the day you surrendered to Narcotics Anonymous, namely, that you are powerless, and that it is only with your willingness to turn your life and your will over to my keeping that relief from addiction finally has come to you. Think not because you've been clean 1, 5, or 10 years that is the result of your unaided efforts. The help which has kept you clean will keep you clean, just as long as you live this program which I've mapped out for you. Beware of the pride that comes from growth and insidious comparisons between yourselves and other organizations whose success depends upon money, property, and prestige. These materials, they're not part of your creed. The success of material organizations comes from the pooling of joint assets. Yours from the union of mutual liabilities. Appeal for membership in other organizations comes from a boastful recital of their accomplishments. Yours from the humble admission of weakness. The motto of successful commercial enterprise is he profits most who serves best. Yours, he serves best who seeks no profit. The wealth of material organizations, when they take their inventory, is measured by what they have left. Yours, when you take your moral inventory, is always measured by what you have given another drug addict. Thank you for letting me be a part of your convention. I love you, Father.